Welcome to the Solo Mo Show, a weekly podcast hosted by Corey O'Brien, the social media strategist at Heat and author of thefutureofads.com.
And I'm Adam Helway, CEO of the digital marketing agency Secret Sushi Creative.
Each episode, we discuss topics, trends, tactics, and tools related to social, local, and mobile marketing and advertising. Our goal is to give you the information you need to be a better marketer. Today is August 7th, 2012, and this is episode number 31.
In this episode, we're going to discuss which smartphone apps shoppers use the most, Starbucks and Square teaming up, Pinterest alternatives, the fancy and supply, Land Rover iAds, a review of Scribe SEO, Facebook's official spam account numbers, the return of Dig, brands using social cam, how to verify a Google Plus page, and plenty more.
All right, sounds like quite the episode, Adam. Let's see if we can continue our streak and squeeze all of that exciting information into under an hour. What do you think?
Is one episode considered a streak?
I consider it a streak. I mean, we broke a 29 episode streak of going over an hour. So,
all right, we gotta go. We gotta move on then right now.
All right, we'll dive into a bit of news. Actually, we do have some interesting news for the Solo Mo Show. So. This is actually a new feature on YouTube, and we decided to enable it for the show. You can create a playlist that just takes segments of videos and loops all of those together into their own playlist. So we actually have a new section on our Solomo YouTube channel for both interviews and tool reviews. So if you go to youtube.com/Solomo Show, you'll see in the sidebar there's actually a button you can click for interviews and a button you can click for tool reviews. And that's just a quick way to access the various one-on-one interviews and tool reviews that we've done throughout previous episodes. So if you wanted to go back and see what we had talked about with somebody or what we thought of some of the tools that we've discussed, that's an easy way to jump right to that specific part of those episodes and hopefully becomes a valuable resource. We're going to continue to add content to those playlists moving forward. So hey, maybe you just want to hear tool reviews from us, you could actually subscribe just to that playlist and only get that content. So we hope that that's a useful addition to that YouTube channel. All right, well, with that, let's dive right into the news.
All right, so we have an infographic of the day today, right?
We do indeed.
Or kind of more of a study with some data kind of abstracted out, even better than an infographic. It's a Nielsen study.
Yes, it's a Nielsen study, which comes with a chart. So, if you put that in a funny font and add some colors, you could call that an infographic.
And the topic is, which smartphone apps do savvy shoppers use the most?
Indeed. So do you want to run through some of the data here, Adam, and then we can talk about what it might mean to the audience?
Sure. And so Nielsen did a study where they were talking about the top mobile shopping apps, and they talked a bit about overall the type of some data related to Americans using smartphones for their shopping experience. They specifically talked about in the month of June, 47% use shopping apps in the month of June alone. And that overall 45 million smartphone owners are use their apps for shopping and commerce. There's a number of the major brands out there, major commerce brands that have their own related shopping apps. So for instance, like eBay and Amazon, those apps ended up being at the top of the list for the most part, attracting around 13 million and 12 million users respectively for theirs. And Nielsen also started to discuss beyond how many kind of total folks were using their applications, actually the amount of time spent on those applications as well. And so interestingly enough, even though there is quite the number of folks using eBay and Amazon apps, apps like Shopkick, for instance, which is an app that you would use as you walk into a store, and throughout the store, you would actually use it as a way to, like, for instance, check in at a certain section of the store as well. So it's almost like a location-based application, but even hyper-location-based inside the stores. That one found users using it for multiple minutes on the site. That one had the most time spent at 3 minutes and 19 seconds. Versus the top apps, eBay, for instance, at a minute.
To cut in real quick, those are actually hour, minute, and second. So eBay was actually an hour and 4 minutes, and Shopkick, surprisingly, I have no idea how they managed to pull this off, at 3 hours and 19 minutes worth of time spent.
I totally misread that column because I thought there's no possible way that would be that much time. But I was going to dive in a little bit, Corey, and ask you, what do you think about the time spent? Because I think that is just as important and potentially even more important than the overall unique audience using that application. Why do you think something like Shopkick, it found that the average time spent was 3 hours, and I believe that was over the entire month of June?
I'm guessing for Shopkick, Shopkick is a bit of a unique app in that it's essentially gamifying shopping inside of a grocery store or a store like Target. So when you're using that application, you actually open it and then leave it running while you're shopping. So you're walking around, you're using it to scan barcodes, that's earning you points, it's earning you coupons, it's earning you discounts, and Shopkick is trying to guide you to different parts of the store by offering you deals. So if it notices, hey, you're the type of person that likes to pick up food for kids, they'll offer coupons for a new kids snack, and they'll say, hey, if you go to this aisle and scan this product, we'll give you an additional percentage off. And it's a way of motivating people to check out new products, get discounts, and ultimately, lead to sales. So I think that high average time spent is just from people having that application open and kind of walking around a store with that application. And the other standouts, you've got eBay Mobile at an hour and 4 minutes. That makes a lot of sense to me as well. I think that's a lot of browsing. I don't know if you're a frequent eBay user, but myself, I get caught up in the land of related items. It's almost worse than Amazon in terms of just getting lost in this world of shopping and clicking around and seeing cool things, and especially if you've got a hobby. I'm into cars, and so I'll get lost in the world of looking at cars and parts and paint, and now I'm looking at engines, and here's toys, and it's suddenly you wake up an hour later and you're like, oh, I gotta emerge from this eBay haze. So both of those applications have kind of unique numbers, but it's interesting to see across the board, really, every application has anywhere from 5 minutes to a half hour worth of usage per month. So pretty significant average time spent here. We're seeing users spend a lot of time inside of these applications, and really at 47% of shoppers using these applications. I think at this point, it's hard to argue that social shopping and shopping with your mobile phone hasn't gone mainstream. I think at this point, everybody should acknowledge that we're using our phones more and more for shopping, and we're doing it while out and about and at home. There's no time when you're not thinking, hey, I should check out that product. Let's see what my phone has to say about it. Or, let me check deals, or let me find out if I can get a coupon using my mobile phone. So definitely a serious channel to consider, and some of these applications are things that every brand can look to take advantage of. Living Social, Shopkick, Groupon, eBay, those are all applications that you could tap into and find additional ways of selling product.
The interesting thing is how many of these applications have entirely different experiences based on what they offer. And so you can see that reflected in primarily the average time on site, like we were discussing. When somebody uses something like an Amazon Mobile, for the most part, it really is usually for research. It's for comparison. So when you're in a store, you end up using their scan it feature to scan a barcode in a store of a product that you have and do a price comparison, and potentially even just simply purchase it right there. Where you were talking about it a little bit, Corey, both on eBay and on Shopkick, where Shopkick is basically used so much more in comparison to the rest, because while you're out, you're actually using it as an ongoing companion for that entire experience. And then you alluded to eBay, and so I think I was a little surprised at the numbers, and they're higher than I expected. I don't know about you, if you feel the same way.
Definitely agree. I was very surprised by the percentage of people using them, and also surprised just by the amount of time. These aren't casual interactions. These are people using the tool and coming back to it and being familiar with it. So I was impressed by the numbers that study unearthed.
Yeah, so I think we're going to pay some more attention to this space as time progresses, and I think, as Corey said, this is proving that this is not a flash in the pan. It's not, still a minority of users, although it is, you say, about half of the users in America. It's a significant enough number that we could say that things are going mainstream with social commerce as related to folks using their smartphones as companions to shopping or to actually just make the purchase itself.
All right, so we have some late breaking news. This was actually a story that essentially went live about 15 minutes before Adam and I were scheduled to record, and I was so excited about it. I was like, all right, we got to throw this in there. I want to talk about it. Normally we like to sit back and try to think about it and figure out the types of information that we want to discuss about a story, but this one crossed the wire, and I was like, all right, I know what I want to say. Let's talk about it. So this is Starbucks and Square teaming up. Big news in the mobile payment space. And we'll include a link to the announcement on the Square blog, but it's essentially a letter from Jack Dorsey, and he starts out by saying, I am pleased and proud to announce that today Starbucks signed up for Square. So pretty cute way of saying, hey, we just made a really big deal happen and expect some big changes for Square in the future. So a couple of things that I was thinking about for this is, number one, it's huge for them. So Starbucks invested $25 million in Square. So not only are they going to be using Square, but they were so confident in it, they actually put money behind it to grow it even further. I think they valued it at something like $3.25 billion. So, they're saying, hey, we're putting money in because this is a huge idea, and here's how huge we think it is. And as part of that deal, they're actually going to be installing or using Square in all 7,000 of their Starbucks locations to process both credit and debit cards. So when you go into Starbucks, if you use a card, you're going to be using Square. And there's a couple of details that still haven't been sorted out. We're not sure if that means they're going to have actual little Square dongles on all of their registers, or if you're going to be able to use Square's pay with your name functionality. So, some of that will be interesting to see how it all plays out, and we'll definitely return to that in the future if some of these details do become clear. But for now, it seems like a huge move for Square, a definite win for them, and also interesting to see Starbucks kind of putting a lot of weight behind a relative newcomer in the space. Square is only 2 years old at this point, so interesting to see them have this much confidence in that service.
Yeah, and for those that just don't know what Square is, it's a couple things actually. It's a mobile service that you can get on your tablet or your smartphone to process payments directly through kind of your Square account, which is almost like a PayPal account that you could have. And it's also, like Corey was saying, a little dongle. It's a little tiny device that goes into the headphone jack of your mobile device and takes advantage of the headphone jack to process credit card payments. And so it's kind of helped democratize payments for folks who, everything from flea markets to coffee shops. Of course, we're talking coffee shops here with Starbucks. And so this is a pretty ginormous step here in regards to mobile payments and commerce and kind of the whole e-wallet phenomenon and so on. And we'll see how it rolls out. And like you said, Corey, investment of $25 million goes beyond likely the money that could be earned by Square as a company just by simply getting paid for the payment processing that they're doing on the millions of cups of coffee that people end up purchasing over time. So this is pretty huge in regards to mobile payments.
And it's also part of the reason Starbucks has done the deal is it's saving them money. So Starbucks has come out and said, look, the amount of money that we're paying for card processing is going to be greatly reduced by partnering with Square. And so there's advantages to both sides. So I think that that's one reason, if you're a small business, to definitely consider looking at Square as well as a way of processing payments. Reading a little bit further into this announcement, like we said, this is late breaking news, but it does actually say that Square and Starbucks will be integrating the pay with your name functionality. So you'll soon be able to go to Starbucks. If you have your phone on you and GPS is activated, you'll just be able to say your name and charge your Starbucks drinks to your Square account. So that's huge. It looks like Starbucks is actually going to integrate the Square directory into both the Starbucks app and the Starbucks in-store digital network. So that's going to be additional exposure for Square. So, I think this is a big step for Square. I think it's going to definitely drive a lot of additional exposure, and it's going to help to make new people aware of Square and aware of how to use it. So if you're a small business and you've got Square, Starbucks is going to do a lot of the work for you to educate customers, get them comfortable with it, make them confident, because that if they see that logo at your business, they're going to think to themselves, oh, well, I just saw that at Starbucks. That's got to be a legitimate way to pay. So it's going to overcome a lot of the hurdles that I think used to exist for a business that was interested in using Square, but maybe wasn't sure what customer reaction was going to be.
So we'll talk about this more as the story develops.
All right, so moving on to our next big topic for the day, and this is a quick review of a couple of major Pinterest alternatives. So this is a story that I've been thinking about and kind of planning for a while, but we talked about Pinterest a couple of times during the show, and I think we're still definitely proponents of Pinterest. I think that we like the opportunities that it provides and see value for businesses getting involved, but at the same time, that doesn't mean they're the only player in the game right now. And so there's actually two different services that have emerged as kind of second place or fast followers, and they're building networks and they're growing. They're not just a Pinterest copycat. These are services that have actually taken unique features and developed those out and really created a unique opportunity for brands to get involved. So the two that we're talking about here are a service called The Fancy, or oftentimes just referred to as Fancy, and then Supply, which decided to spell its name really weird. It's SVPPLY, but I believe it's pronounced Supply. So Fancy and Supply, are you familiar with these, Adam? Have you had a chance to play around with either of them?
I checked out Supply a while back. The Fancy was new until you brought it to my attention. So no, I mean, and in fact, I would like to tell the audience, or I'd like you to tell the audience a little bit about how you think, because they do have very different mechanics between all of them, right? They're not exactly like, for instance, Pinterest clones. So how do you see them, say, overlapping on what Pinterest is doing in order to qualify as alternatives?
Sure. So what's interesting for both of these is that I think they're much more focused on shopping and the retail experience, or sort of recreating the retail experience. So Pinterest emerged as just a way of categorizing information. So I can create things that have no actual relation to shopping. I could have DIY projects or just photos that I like or quotes that I find interesting. It's not really catered just to shopping. Both Fancy and Supply are really built for and targeted towards shopping. It's all about, collecting items that you either own or would like to own, sharing those items with others. And so it's doing things like integration with online stores, a focus more on actually bringing in some of the pricing information. So making sure when somebody adds something to Fancy or Supply, there's a price attached. And in some cases, you can actually purchase things from inside of those applications. So Fancy specifically, and this was a number pulled from back in May, so it's likely even higher, but they were doing $50,000 in commerce each week through the application. So instead of having people go from the service to your site, they were actually enabling commerce inside of Fancy itself and doing a significant amount of revenue. So businesses that had really adopted the Fancy system and said, hey, I'm going to offer my products inside of Fancy, we're seeing a pretty good return on that. And some of the other interesting features to talk about. So Fancy, we just talked about how they're really geared towards commerce. They're also geared towards incentivizing people to add products. So unlike something like a Pinterest, where we've actually talked about in previous episodes, Pinterest is taking steps to prevent people from using things like referral codes and tracking. Fancy is embracing it. They're actually allowing people to make money off the products that they add. So if you add something to Fancy, and then somebody clicks on that product and ends up purchasing it from a participating store, you'll earn 2% on that purchase. So they're essentially paying you to build up your influence, find cool products, and share those with your fans. They also have an iPhone and iPad application that allows purchasing directly from that application. So targeting more of a leisure kind of browse experience. You can pull out your iPad, say, hey, let me check out Fancy, see what my friends have unearthed this week. And if you like something, you could actually purchase that item directly from the application. So I think that's an interesting advantage. And it also has an even male-female split. So we've talked about in the past how Pinterest is very female-focused. Fancy, partly because the audience is a little smaller, but it actually has maintained a pretty good split of male and female users. And I think part of this was due initially to it emerging as more of a Pinterest alternative, and so it was acquiring a lot of male users who said, I'm not really digging Pinterest, but I like what Fancy's going on. So it's appealing to both the sexes. Both male and female users are checking out Fancy and saying, hey, I see something here that I like. So, Fancy definitely has a focus on commerce, and I think that for that reason, if you're the type of company that's selling product that work well in the online environment, I think it's definitely worth checking out and seeing if it might be a good way of finding new customers.
Yeah, I think all your points are well taken. The thing about supply that's really interesting is that it's very reminiscent to me of GDGT.com, if you've ever got a chance to play with that. And so GDGT.com is a community, an online community that's been around for a while. That's pretty much around gadgets and electronics and things like that. So you go there, you check out product reviews and discussions on particular gadgets and things. But the thing that I see that's very, very similar is the whole I want or I own aspect of what you can do on supply and tagging a particular product. And usually the way that translates into the whole system is to help have an algorithm that can properly actually recommend to you products and such based on things that you want or that you already own. It can then say, okay, great, we can build up a profile of the types of things that Adam or Corey likes, and we can help him discover more items, more content, more cool things to check out. Between the both of them, it really is about discovery, right? It's about both discovery and being potentially a tastemaker as you curate things and you add to it as well. And so you can either be one or the other or a little of both in the sense of curating and earning some money off of something like the Fancy with all these affiliate payments and so on. And so you're the curator, you're putting out things that you think are really cool that people are going to gravitate towards and putting up some images that are going to make those attractive for folks who might want to purchase them. Or you're the person that just wants to simply say, look, I'm interested in these things, shoot some great products at me and give me something cool to check out and discover. And with Pinterest, in comparison, like you said, although it does have a lot of commerce oriented stuff happening over there, the commerce aspect is almost somewhat of not an afterthought, but it's something off to the side in comparison to the overall experience of discovering things. Which makes it still, though, a good and ideal alternative for folks like content marketers and so on who just want to put up cool things like infographics or other things that may not be product related in comparison to these other two, correct?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's definitely targeted more towards the physical retailer. So if you're an information company, or you're an agency, you're somebody that sells books and things, it might not be as well suited to your type of company. But if you're selling physical products, it's going to be a perfect fit and almost a better fit than Pinterest. But I do think that's a good thing to point out, that it's definitely targeted more towards physical product retail and not just information sharing.
And Corey, then let's take it back to what we've discussed before about how to take advantage of these sites, or just a quick reminder about how to take advantage of these sites that actually use images primarily as a way of discovering and marketing. We've talked about this theme in a number of different ways, from everything from the updates on Yelp to Facebook timeline, and with Pinterest. Do you have any sort of different tip that you might offer based on what you've seen that's different from Pinterest to these couple guys that we talked about?
Yeah, so Pinterest is really, the big tip there is optimizing your images so that when others share them on Pinterest, it's putting the product in a good light. for both Fancy and Supply, because they're so targeted towards the retailer, you can actually take much more control over your product and the way that it's presented. So I look at this almost similar to the tips that we've shared for managing your Yelp profile. You really want to get in there and find out how to make the most of how your products are presented. So for both Fancy and Supply, you can actually connect those directly to your product offering, connect them to your online retail store, and bring in the products yourself so that when others discover them, they're discovering them inside of your account and they're sharing it. And, you know, if they do actually want to go through and purchase, they can do so directly from those applications, which is going to help you drive revenue. One of the unique aspects of Supply that we didn't get a chance to talk about yet is inside of their iOS application, they actually have a really cool feature called the Store Explorer. And what that is a way of highlighting unique brick and mortar stores that are around you at any specific location. So if you've got that application opened up, you can go to this Store Explorer feature and it pulls up a map and says, hey, check out these cool places around you that have products listed on Supply. So especially if you're in a city like San Francisco, you can load this up and suddenly discover all of these really cool products that are in brick and mortar stores around you. But the way to make sure that that's being used, optimally, and that if somebody does happen to open that up, they find your store, is to make sure that your store has all of its products associated correctly inside of Supply. So go in, browse for your store, make sure it's got the right products there, because it's pulling in that product feed into that map application when somebody does decide to explore. And if they click on your site name and they see all these cool things, they're much more likely to say, all right, I'll walk down the street and check that store out. So go in there, make sure it's got the right information, it's got photos, everything looks the way you want it to look. And then for Fancy, if you'd like to take an additional step, contact them and find out how to actually connect your retail process into their service so that somebody can actually purchase items from inside of the application.
I think these are good. I almost wouldn't even consider them alternatives, to be honest, because they're in a way expanding upon the model. And I think it's a really awesome place for folks, based on all the reasons that you talked about, for retailers to take a look and use it as an additional channel for folks to discover their content. It's almost a no-brainer, unless there's something, dive deep down into the terms and conditions that somebody might be against. It just seems like a great way of kind of socializing your content a little bit because of some of the other features they have, and really allowing folks to discover maybe first and foremost one product, and then beyond that, some of the other things that you have to offer once they click through and actually find your site. So it's a traffic generator too. So again, really good discoveries here with these couple folks. Are there any other ones out there before we go on too long about this? Are there any other ones out there that somebody might pay attention to besides these two sites?
These are really the two big ones. I think both of these have 1 million plus users, so they've got enough users to make it worth your time. The Fancy is driving retail. So I looked around. I didn't really find anything else that I felt was worthy of adding to this category. There are some that are more specifically targeted at being alternatives to Pinterest, but none of those have really taken off. There's sites like Gentle Mint, which is kind of the leader for taking Pinterest and trying to apply it to guys, but it got a lot of initial press for people saying, oh, it's the manly alternative, but I don't think that it's really got sustained users for it. So I would say that Fancy and Supply are the two big ones worthy of checking out. And actually,
it's Gentle Mint and so on, and some of these other ones are really, rather than all Pinterest alternatives, they are really Pinterest clones, right? That are very, very focused on niche audiences.
Yeah, and you did mention low-hanging fruit, so I forgot to mention one thing for Supply. There's a lot going on here, so we're sort of jumping around. But the other cool feature of Supply, and specifically if you're thinking to yourself, okay, well, how do I just see if it's worth my time, is that you can actually target people that have indicated that they want your product. So Adam, you mentioned this, and that in addition to being able to say, oh, this is cool, I like this, you can actually add it to your want list, which is kind of like a shopping list or a dream list. And as a brand, you can actually go in and say, okay, show me all of the people that have wanted my product, and then work with Supply to actually offer those people incentives to then make the purchase. So, you'd have to contact Supply directly to find out a little more about this program. It's something that they're kind of catering on a case-by-case basis, but I'd imagine it's things like being able to offer discounts or being able to just directly contact the users that have added your product to their want list and say, hey, I appreciate that you've added it to the list. I'd like to offer you a discount, or I'd like to, see what we can do to close this sale. So I think that would be a great first step, would be to just search for your own products inside of Supply and see if it's showing up on people's want list. And then if so, think about, contacting those users and saying, hey, I'd love to go and move that from your want list to your have list. What is it going to take to make this sale?
So I'm going to download the other apps. I've been a member at Supply, and I'm just checking out the Fancy, which I'll just have to get past the name myself. And I'm going to check it out because I find myself using services like Guilt Group and Fab.com a lot, and this is different, right? There's a different model in play here, and I think this is again going to be another interesting space where we're looking beyond Facebook and Twitter as just like the only social ways of getting people to pay attention to what you have to sell. So shall we move on to the next topic, Corey?
I think we should. So the next topic we had on the queue is Land Rover experimenting with Apple iAd, and apparently doing so with so much success that Apple decided to highlight them as a case study. So Adam, since this was a video that you had unearthed, maybe you could walk us through a little bit of what it talks about and maybe what this signals for other companies and marketers that are looking to potentially advertise in the mobile space.
Sure thing. And those who aren't familiar with Apple's iAd platform, it's been around for a couple years now, and it is their platform that they have for advertising on their mobile devices, both the iPod Touch, the iPad, and of course the iPhone. And the difference between, say, an iAd and a regular ad is, a regular ad might be that there's a banner ad that pops up while you're looking at a website or while you're using an application, and you tap it and it just takes you over to a targeted landing page someplace on the web. An iAd is much more rich, and it leverages HTML5 and some other things like QuickTime and so on Apple's devices to actually take over your screen for a period of time and show you a very engaging interactive ad that might use things like video. And to be honest, it really is almost like an app within an app that is created for the purpose of engaging with a brand around a particular campaign that you have for advertising. And so what Apple did, and this has been around for a couple years now, and they hasn't been a lot of, I won't say it's not necessarily been successful, but it surely hasn't taken off in a way like what you've seen the Apple app stores, for instance, has taken off and just caught on fire. iAds hasn't been the same, and so Apple put together kind of a highlighting video around what the experience has been with Land Rover using iAds to advertise one of their upcoming, I think it's their Land Rover model, not their Range Rover model vehicle.
The Land Rover Evoque. And it's a pretty cool looking car, by the way. And they were talking, the folks over at Land Rover and the advertising agency were talking about going through the process of using Apple's iAds or thinking about using Apple's iAds and how they were going to leverage the platform, which was, there's two parts to the platform that are very different. One is the targeting of the platform is a bit different because although you've got maybe some of the other the standard ways of targeting folks through their demographics and so on, you've also got the opportunity to take a look and see, well, what kind of music is this person listening to, and what kind of apps are they downloading and using, and actually using that as a target. And I'll go back to that in just a second. Then the other thing that's obviously significantly different is that rather than just simply being a video or rather than just simply being something to click on and it takes you elsewhere, it's
it actually takes advantage of the entire device. So everything from the gyroscope to the other sensors in the device. You've got audio, you've got video, you've got location-based functionality. Anything that's within the Apple device, the sensors in those mobile devices can be taken advantage of to enhance the experience in an iAd. And so quickly to go back to the app targeting, imagine now being able to understand the type of apps that your target market downloads and uses, and being able to get kind of a framework or an understanding of what are they most interested in actually experiencing with these apps. Do they like driving games the most? Do they like photography apps? Do they like apps that are more social? Taking a look and understanding the type of apps they use tells a lot about who that person is, and eventually the type of iAd you might create, since the iAds are much more like apps themselves. And so a couple of the things that they talked about throughout the video was that the Land Rover folks and the advertising agency that they worked with felt that the medium was pretty much what helped dictate the message that could be delivered, and that they felt that in this case an iAd went above and beyond any of the previous mediums that have been available, and have allowed them to create a message that was much more experiential. It was much more, of course, interactive, engaging, and immersive. And if you take a look at the video, you'll see how they made it, much more immersive. They did everything from take a really high quality 3D version of the inside of this Evoque, and you just take the phone and you just start moving it around like it's a window. It's pretty much like augmented reality in a way, although not true augmented reality, because it's not actually overlaying it on top of the real world. But it used the gyroscope so that you could actually move your phone up and down, side to side, and as you're doing so, it's like a window into the cabin of this vehicle, where you're just right there in the middle of this vehicle, and you're able to look around and appreciate the interior, see how it looks.
I will say though, that was my one criticism of the video, is they made it sound as if either Land Rover or Apple had sort of invented the 3D looking around with your phone, when really it was a technology that was out there. But in the video they're like, we thought to ourselves, what if you could experience the interior of a Land Rover by just moving your phone? And so we contacted Apple and they made that happen. And I was like, well, of course they made it happen. It's something that's been around for years. Like, it's just taking, back in the day, you used to have, this was a popular technique for online websites. You could move your mouse around and it would sort of scan around inside of a 3D photo. And so that was my one criticism I did want to make sure that I got there, is
it's kind of like a virtual tour in a home, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's really what it is. And how I looked at it was that they were trying to figure out how to make the experience as close to being in the vehicle as possible at that point, and that was Apple's solution. That's how I took it. And then they had a few other things with the application, like putting the car on kind of this virtual road and being able to change the color of the vehicle and change the background that you were driving on, and a bunch of things that would get the user engaged in using it and experiencing the application and getting to know the car in a way that they wouldn't be able to on a standard ad for the most part, or most other mediums. They talked about, for them, they were really ecstatic about the fact that they felt that the average user was on there for 80 seconds, an average of 80 seconds, which is a fancy way of saying a minute and 20 seconds, and that they felt it was excellent compared to other forms of media like TV and so on. They didn't give a lot of information as to say, well, what really does the 80-second translate into, when it comes to sales and so on. I mean, if you're talking about that 80 seconds in comparison to other forms where you're introducing somebody to your product or service and increasing and creating a sense of awareness about a particular product and so on, that's kind of how I took it. What did you think of it, Corey?
I thought that, 80 seconds is definitely a respectable amount of time, especially in the mobile environment where you're essentially taking somebody out of the application experience that they were in and moving them into your own application experience. Like you said, the iAd is it's basically just an application. In all intent and purposes, it's not like, oh, I click in and now I'm watching a video. It's, oh, I click in and now there's 4 other things I can do. I can take this 3D tour, I can customize a car, I can watch a video. So you're taking somebody into an application, and 80 seconds means that they're doing a great job of targeting. They're not dropping people who, accidentally click, and then 5 seconds later they're like, I don't want a Range Rover, I have no idea what this thing is, and they click out. This is 80 seconds worth of engaged audience, and potentially somebody that, could be enticed to go check out the car in person or contact their local sales representative. So I think that it's definitely strong results, and I can see why they're highlighting this as an example of what works well. Part of the challenge with an iAd is there's definitely a minimum investment. So when they first came out, they never really made this public, but word got around that if you didn't have $1 million to spend, don't even call up Apple. They're just not going to talk to you. And then that slowly whittled down. So for a while it was, well, if you don't have $500,000, and then the last number that I heard was if you don't have $300,000, don't call. But $300,000 was kind of the minimum buy-in. The advantage to that is that was all ad spend. So if you spent $300,000, they kind of threw in the application development for free. So that was, a nice added value. But at the same time, you're spending $300,000. So this is not the, hey, I want to promote my mom and pop ice cream shop or my
I was going to do an iAd for Solo Mo Show. We can't do that now?
I mean, we can, but we're going to need some additional investment before we can make that happen. So, it's these big brands, it's launching products, it's huge campaigns. And so, it would be nice to see it trickle down a little bit more and find ways of letting smaller budgets play in the iAd environment. But at the same time, it's good to look, it's good to see what you can do with the big budget and see what's working, and the types of applications that it takes to get 80 seconds worth of somebody's time engaged in an advertisement.
And you're going to take a look at this as an alternative to something else that you may do, and the comparison of the results. I mean, in the video at the beginning, they show that they're parking this vehicle out in something like Times Square, and a lot of people are crowding around it and checking it out and so on. And how much money does it take, and what is the results of doing something like driving the vehicle up to a location where you're limited by the visibility in that location, the traffic in that location, and so on. And in fact, the type of experience that you can provide somebody in a situation like that versus spending some of that money on reaching out and doing an iAd, even if it does cost $300,000, but just taking into comparison the experience that you can present to folks. The other thing I wanted to quickly point out with this too is that iAds does have an iAd authoring tool that's out there, and it's completely for free. And so you can actually play around and create some iAds that you can't, of course, deliver through Apple's advertising network, but you can get on there, you can play with it, and you can see how easy or difficult it might be to create even a simple asset from the very, very beginning. I don't know how that translates into, like you said, Corey, you end up spending $300,000 and you get the ad for free. And if Apple's going to create it and be the steward for that, who better could you have in order to help you build a really awesome experience than somebody who's going to be most familiar with the platform? But you could play with it and you could see, and it's pretty straightforward. Apple does an incredible job with everything from their development tools, their iAd platform, and their iBook authoring to make it really easy for you to author a very simple piece of content for their platform. So I recommend that folks check the video out. We'll have it linked in our notes, show notes on the site, and the video is definitely worth watching. You'll really get an opportunity to experience what an iAd looks like.
The other thing you can play around with is I'm not sure the exact name, but I'll call it the iAd Explorer. It's an application that Apple created that basically showcases all of the currently running and some of the previously ran iAds. So it's basically just an application that highlights ads, but it's actually pretty cool. If you're interested in seeing what companies like Land Rover are doing with iAds, there's a nice little scroller. You can find the ad you want to click on. You click on that, it launches this sort of iAd application experience. You can play around and ideally, again, just see what other brands are doing, see what catches your own eye, see what gets you to click, and then take some of that and extract it into your own advertising programs and say to yourself, okay, what caught my eye and how do I use that for my own message? So that's another tool to check out as well, and we'll include a link to that in the show notes.
So on to our tool review of the episode.
There we go. A tool called Scribe SEO. And Adam, I am interested to hear your take on Scribe SEO and who might want to be using it to optimize their own content for search engines and search engine users.
Sure. So Scribe SEO is an online service that you could use for your content management system. They have a WordPress plugin, Drupal, Joomla, and all those things. And it does a number of things, and you'll be able to check it out at scribeseo.com. But one of the things that I like the most about it, and that I actually use and I refer other folks to use it and so on, is they have a content analyzing service, essentially. I mean, they have a few different modules, but the content analyzing one where when you put it into, say, your WordPress site or your blog, for instance, one of the challenges that a lot of people have, especially if they don't have either the money or the resources or whatever the case may be, but to be able to have a resource that helps them optimize every piece of content that they produce, for instance, on their blog. If you're producing one or more articles per day on your blog, if you want to make it optimal for search engines to find it, based on what your users are searching for, and that everything is really just razor sharp in regards to searchability based on keywords that you're trying to target on search engines. It can get expensive to have, for instance, an SEO person on staff, or you can't have every single person who's a blog author understand every intricate part of SEO. It gets in the way a lot of times of what the voice is for that content. And so what Scribe does is it will actually allow you to, once you put you're finished doing your post, you put all your links in there, you put your images in there, and so on. In most cases, it pairs itself with actually SEO plugins for WordPress. So, for instance, Yoast SEO. Let's see, it's WordPress SEO by Yoast is a really popular plugin, and that it pairs itself with. And you fill in the title of the post, your meta tags, and things like your description and such, and then you click Analyze. And what Scribe SEO does is it goes through all of your content on your post and your keywords and everything, and it spits out this intricate report that tells you what it believes that Google or other search engines will see as being the most important parts of your content. How many times does it see a particular keyword showing up in your content? What is it going to look like in search engines with your title tag and your description, so that when somebody finds this in their search results, are they going to be compelled to click it, and are they going to feel that it accurately represented what was actually on their site on that particular post when you clicked over and saw it? And so what I think is really awesome about it is, for one, it helps you kind of quickly gauge whether or not you're on target for your particular post. And two, for instance, for my clients, I strongly believe that this is it's almost like training wheels for SEO for folks. Once you work with them the first couple times and you set the stage for them, as I do with my clients, then you have something like Scribe SEO that allows them to actually kind of have this artificial intelligence that tells them whether or not their particular post is correct, and gives them even some tips on how to adjust it without having to necessarily be there over their shoulder all the time and incur a huge additional cost, or even get them discouraged because they're just really trying to understand how they could optimize their site and don't get SEO. And the one last thing is if you don't end up using it for, say, your WordPress site, and you want to use it for your site that's not running on anything that they provide plugins for, there's actually they call it a web interface for it as well, where you could copy and paste and correct and compose all of your content in an editor that they have directly on the website, and then do the same thing with your analyzing, the analysis. And so the way they charge, real quick, is it's a subscription based thing. So month to month, you pay a certain amount for a certain number of analyses. I don't know if that's a correct word to say, analyses. Once you use them, you run out. And so if you, for instance, are blogging every single day, then you might want to pay for one of their plans that allows you to have, say, 30 analyses a month. And if you publish more, then you could have more, and so on. So I think it's a really great tool to help your entire team create web optimized SEO content for both your website as well as your blog, and will really get your team understanding how, even before they start writing their post, how they might title their post and how they might target their post for search traffic and inbound traffic based on the recommendations that Scribe provides.
Yeah, I do wish they had a free option, or at least a trial. They have a 30-day money-back guarantee, so if you buy it, you use it, and you don't like it, they'll give you your money back. But even if it was just like a single evaluation per month, it would be nice for them to let you try it out just to see what some of the advantages are. Though I think, Adam, like you mentioned, using it a couple of times, you start to understand some of the tips that they're using, and so maybe they figure, hey, somebody uses it once, and that's getting some of the value out of our tool, so we'd like to get some money for that. There's 4 levels and then an enterprise version. So the starter plan starts at $17 a month, and that's for 15 evaluations. And then it goes up to $27 a month for 30 evaluations. $47 a month gets you 120 evaluations. And then $97 a month gets you 300 evaluations. So as you said, Adam, it basically stair steps up depending on how many times per month you're going to need to use this. But it starts out at $17, which I think if you're producing a lot of content, and anybody who's producing content on a blog, the goal is to rank inside of search. So if you're a little wary of SEO, you're not quite sure what you should and shouldn't be doing, I'd say give it a try. $17 for a month worth of service. It should at least give you enough information to say, yes, this is for me, I'm seeing a lot of value out of this, or no, it's not for me. And, at the end of the day, $17 to learn that isn't a huge investment. So I'd say this one's worth checking out, and seeing what it can do for you.
Yeah, and there's a couple. I think there's only one other competitor that does some similar things. I think it's called Inbound Writer. I haven't had a chance to play around with it just yet, but I definitely think that for those folks who are producing content, of course, if you've got a lot of different channels like social and so on that you could use to distribute that content, and you're getting inbound links from that or leads from that, that's all well and good. But if you also want to really take advantage of search, like you said, starting at $17 up to, I think it was $27 for the next one, that kind of range right there for even a smaller company or business is well worth the return that you could get on optimizing your content properly for search.
All right. Well, you know what time it is now, Adam?
It's time for the lightning round.
The very famous, very difficult, very exciting lightning round. I need one of those soundboards where you press the button and it just goes lightning round.
I know we got to do like what is it, the Mad Money or something like that, or you just randomly hitting buttons during the podcast. The
giant modified that was easy buttons that we can just slam on to do all sorts of crazy sound effects.
Exactly. So what do we got on deck here today?
So we got 3 stories. Facebook estimates official percentage of spam accounts, the return of Dig, and brands trying out and potentially seeing success with social cam. So a couple of exciting topics. And you want me to start off with the first one, Adam, or do you want to
Yes, sir. Go ahead and start off with the first one.
All right. So I'm going to put 60 seconds on the timer. Ready and go. So this is actually a bit of a follow-up to a previous story we covered last week about the estimated number of Facebook bots that were potentially clicking on ads and driving up numbers without actually delivering value. So Facebook, now being a public company, has to disclose additional information that they didn't have to when they were private. And one of those is what they're categorizing as undesirable accounts. And they actually estimated that 8.7% of their monthly active users are these undesirable accounts. They did this in a filing with the Securities and Exchange Commission, so pretty believable numbers. They're not going to lie to the Securities and Exchange Commission. And those accounts that are considered undesirable include duplicate accounts, miscategorized, and spam accounts. So all things that are kind of clogging up the system. And I think it's interesting to see them admit this. I don't think it necessarily hurts. There's still hundreds of millions of legitimate accounts, but it is interesting to see them acknowledge the existence of bad accounts. All right, Adam, 60 seconds back on the timer. What is your take on Facebook's official bad account numbers? Go.
I don't necessarily think it's terrible just yet. But I'm really definitely paying a lot more attention now to Facebook based on, even last week we talked about the bots clicking on the accounts. I even mentioned about my experience with doing ads and so on, and what I thought about the quality of the standard Facebook social ads. So all in all, I mean, right now people are gunning for Facebook. I would say there's a lot of people out there, at least in the press, that are having fun with kind of poking fun at Facebook and some of these potential chinks in their armor, whether they be true or not. And so I'm paying attention because I've experienced some things that I felt were true. And there are some things out there like this that, of course, Facebook is saying is true. And some other things out there that are a little bit more like rumor mill. So I'm going to pay a little bit more attention to Facebook as time goes by.
All right. Just in time. So moving on to the next story with 60 seconds on the clock, I will dive in. So this is the return of Dig.com. Dig.com was a very famous site from a number of years back. It was a way for people to submit stories, vote on their favorite, and actually surface content from all around the web. And sadly, it sort of fell out of favor. They made some changes to the site. It was eventually sold. But it was sold to BetaWorks, who has rebirthed Dig as a brand new service. They actually did so in 6 weeks. They did it very publicly. It was a very impressive feat of engineering. They must have spent many late nights and drank a whole lot of caffeinated beverages. But I think it's pretty cool. It's surfacing content. It's tied heavily into Facebook, and they did so in order to, again, meet that 6-week turnaround time. But it has all the things that made Dig popular. Top stories, the popular stories, and the upcoming. But it's removed some of the things that eventually made Dig unpopular. So I think it's a return to its roots and definitely worth paying attention to. I like it. All right, just in time. Adam, what is your take on the rebirth of Dig? Worth paying attention to as a marketer? Go.
I don't think so just yet. I actually think I think if it ends up hitting, I mean, paying attention to it and targeting it is one thing. If your content happens to slip and jump on Dig, that's a whole nother. Reddit has really stole their thunder and has become a place where you could potentially even target Reddit a bit with the right strategy. But based on what I'm seeing here with Dig, I still think, I mean, they've changed it so much since what it was before. I don't know about you, but it was a place I went every single day to kind of just find the coolest thing. They've definitely come up with a much cleaner design, and they're trying to implement a number of other things here. But I think that they really have changed it so dramatically that they've almost, in a way, ripped the heart out of what Dig was before. I mean, they don't even have comments on here. I think that was something I saw recently because I've only played with it a little bit. They don't have comments, and comments was a huge element of the original Dig, which would help it thrive in the future.
All right, so it sounds like the takeaway there is interesting, but worthy of just keeping an eye on and potentially coming back to later.
Yes, sir.
All right, so let's round out the lightning round with our third story of the day. We got 60 seconds on the clock and diving right in. So this was brands trying out and potentially seeing success with Social Cam, which kind of caught my attention because for a while we had dismissed Social Cam as a little bit spammy, something that was taking advantage of the Facebook system. A little spammy. All right, a lot spammy. But it turns out there's a number of brands that have actually, embraced it. So the ones named in this story are Meow Mix, Brisk Iced Tea, GE, and Avion Water. And all of them have 700,000 plus followers. Now, the trick to those numbers is they've got 700,000 plus followers, but if you look at their accounts, I'm not seeing that translate into video views, so it does call some of those follower counts into question. I don't know if SocialCam was using a suggested follow list that helps some of those accounts boost their numbers or what, but they're at least putting out content. The content is well suited to the SocialCam system. I'm just still not convinced, despite these big numbers, that the SocialCam system is worthy of paying attention to. All right, Adam, what is your take on these SocialCam numbers? Ready? Go.
I think it's interesting. Right here in the post, it says we're not concerned about Social Cam coming off as spammy. Says John Naffman, digital brand manager for PepsiCo Brisk, and he says what is it? Noting that users can opt out of having it appear in their feeds. Yes, I understand that, but it doesn't mean that the association with social cam is not going to be spam, just because you do have the opportunity to opt out, especially when, as we've noted in the past, opting out meant actually trying to discover a button that was hidden in one area or the other, and so on. So and your observation also of seeing it, whether or not it translated from actual followers to engagement, you have that in question. I think it all still points to the fact that, yeah, it's great if you feel you are getting some success out of social cam, but I don't necessarily think it's not the place to go right now.
All right. Not the place to go. I think I would agree with that. All right, well, with the end of the lightning round, we're actually going to introduce a new section of the show, which is always fun. We've done this a couple of times in the past. We introduced the lightning round itself, as well as our infographic of the day. So the thing that we decided to add is an action item of the day. And both Adam and I feel like, we try to integrate action items throughout the show. We definitely try to give you guys takeaways to, say, all right, well, that sounds great and all, but what do I actually do with that information? But what we're going to do here is try to figure out one thing a week where, if you ignore the rest of the show, this is at least one thing that you can definitely put into action between this episode and the next. So today's action item is to verify your Google Plus page. So this was a new feature that Google Plus recently announced, which is that you can verify your local business's Google Plus page automatically. So prior to this, it was sort of no man's land. Even I wasn't really sure how to verify a Google Plus page, but if your Google Plus page represents a physical business, it's now extremely easy to get verified. And the advantage of being verified is twofold. One, you get that nice little verified check mark, so when somebody comes to your Google Plus page, they know it's you, they know you're officially represented, they know the information they're getting is legit. And two, it gives you control over that page. So you can do things like edit your business hours, update your information, which we've repeated time and time again is extremely important. Make sure that any information about your business that is out online is accurate. The last thing you want somebody to do is to get the wrong phone number or the wrong address and call that number or try to show up at that address and say, hey, where the heck is this place? And then just give up. You got to make sure your information that's out there is legitimate. So we'll include a link to this in the show notes. You're going to want to go to the Verify Google page, and there's a couple of pretty easy steps. So at the very top of your Google Plus page, it'll say Unverified. You hover over that and click Verify Now, and it'll ask you to confirm your address. Once you've confirmed that address, they'll actually mail you a postcard, and this is not unheard of. This is actually how Foursquare used to verify addresses as well. So they'll send you a postcard. You get that postcard. On there is a unique code. You take that code to google.com/local/verify, you enter it, and they now know that you have access to the mail at that location, which in their minds means, yes, you officially do represent that business. Once you insert that PIN, again, you have the ability to control all of your Google Plus local information, connect your Google Plus local page to your Google Plus page, and verify your account. You will look official, you will be official, and it will make all of your Google Plus efforts that much more effective. So, really simple process. It's just a couple clicks, and it unleashes a whole lot of additional abilities. So, definitely something that if you've got a physical business and a Google Plus page, I highly recommend you do this in the coming week.
Yeah, and so with that, we're going to continue to cover things that we think are action items that you should do, and we want to hear if you did them by commenting on the episode on YouTube or on solomoshow.com, or tell us on Twitter. These are things that we think are important for folks to be jumping out and doing very soon after the show. And we want to give you something at the end of every single show, as Corey said, to do every episode. So with that, Corey, are we going to wrap this sucker up?
We are. We went a little bit over our hour goal, but hey, when you're covering late-breaking Square/Starbucks news, sometimes you got to devote a little extra time to it. So with that, we will call this episode a wrap. We will, God, I hate that. I need a better transition for that section. I will just say here, this is something I'm still trying to work out. So the transition from our main content to, I don't even know what to call it, our conclusion topics, our information about the show. But as always, we always like to start this with a thanks to the audience. For those of you that listen live, to those of you that download the episodes, and hey, for those of you that are just discovering us for the first time, we really appreciate you checking out the show. both Adam and I are just out there trying to help you do your job a little better, and so we appreciate you sticking with us through some of these learning experiences, through some of the growth of the show, and, hopefully getting some value out of the show. If you do like the show and want to help others discover it, we would greatly appreciate that as well. All it takes is a quick trip to iTunes for you to rate the show. Rating the podcast helps us reach a new audience. It does things like highlight it inside of the iTunes podcast application, ranks higher in iTunes podcast search. It really helps to build the audience. So take a minute out of your day, head on over to iTunes, search for Solo Mo Show, and give us a rating. We would really appreciate it. And if you'd like to get in touch, if it's to ask questions, suggest topics, give feedback, or even just to say hi, we definitely encourage that. We love to hear from the audience. We'd love to hear your thoughts. We'd love to interact with you, so feel free to get in touch. One of the quickest ways is via Twitter. You can reach the show. It's at Solo Mo Show, or I can be reached directly. I'm at Corey O'Brien.
And I'm at Secret Sushi. You can also email us. Both of Corey and I check the email from time to time, and that email is solomoshow@gmail.com. And we, of course, being the social show that we are in a number of different areas online. You can find us. We have a Facebook page where we share things that we discover throughout the week between episodes. You can also find us on Google Plus, where we do the same thing there. And we also have a board on Pinterest. So if you just look up Solo Mo Show on Pinterest, either you might find somebody else's pinning of our content, or you'll find our board where we collect all of it at once, and would love for you to feel free to repin the content as well of your favorite episode so far.
There you go. And all of the links that we discussed today, as well as the links to our social channels that we just mentioned, can be found in the show notes. And there's a couple of ways to find those show notes. The easiest is to just go to solomoshow.com. Each show gets its own post on the blog, and below the video player, you'll find all of the links to what we discussed today. It's a great way to keep up with the topics we're discussing, dive in a little deeper on your own, and, we've talked about a number of different resources, so it's a quick and easy way to find those and take action on things like our action item of the day. So go check out the show notes. They should also be available in your podcast player of choice. Just search around. There should be an option to view show notes, but if you can't find it, check out solomoshow.com, because we know they're there. We put them there. And with that, we will call this episode a wrap and see you guys next week.
Take care.